What do you do in your position?
I'm the state senator for 250,000 people in Schuylkill and 5 other counties. And so half of the job is working on turning bills and ideas into laws. The other half of the job is what we call the ombudsman function in the poli-sci books. That's helping people solve problems large and small every day.
Do you enjoy your position?
I enjoy it very much, yes.
Why did you want your position?
When I was a senior at Tamaqua High School many years ago, the student government sent me to Washington for a week on a special program for kids interested in history and politics. I was thrilled when they picked me. I later found out I was the only one who applied. And so that's when the bug bit, and it never, I guess it never left.
Who do your decisions affect?
Well, anyone who lives in Pennsylvania, I guess, especially the people who live in the 6 counties that I represent.
What is your most recent project?
Most recent project, Senator Rhodes, before he died, was working on a bill to give local governments, boroughs, cities, townships, more powers in trying to fight blight, and to rebuild communities. After he passed and I became the senator in a special election, I promised his family, I promised his staff that would be my first goal. We turned that bill into law, and now local governments all over the state are trying, I think, really hard to use those powers to crack down on some out-of-town slumlords who just, let's face it, they just don't care about their properties.
What is your favorite project?
My favorite project, the old Boy Scout in me was fascinated by a problem we had outside of Pottsville several years ago where there was a huge scrap tire, thousands of them, a scrap tire dump. No one knew what to do with them. We worked with a lot of volunteers. We worked with the House Conservation Committee. We turned that into a law under Governor Ridge. We have now cleaned up, I think, 93% of the illegal scrap tire dumps in Pennsylvania. And so I ended up learning a lot more about tires, I think, than I ever really wanted to. But that was one of my favorite bills.
If you could change one thing, what would it be?
This terrible recession. I mean, this is the worst economy, I think, since Herbert Hoover. And so it affects everyone. It affects what we can do in terms of funding the schools, the universities, the state government, the local governments. And so we think maybe we're finally starting to see some small progress, but this has been a really, really tough couple of years for a lot of people.
Do you work with students?
I work with students a lot. I have a daughter who's trying to bankrupt me in college, and so I turn into Dr. Argall one night a week at Penn State Harrisburg, and I teach a class there in public administration.
Why do you stay involved?
It's an important part of the job. If a senator or a representative at the state level loses touch with the people that he or she is supposed to be representing, they're not going to be there very long.
How do you listen to others' concerns?
One of my favorite things is through what we call a town hall breakfast meeting, where I'll invite a few hundred people to come and have a cup of coffee and a donut with me. And sometimes we get 50 people, sometimes we get 150 people. And they're not usually shy about sharing their thoughts. We'll also mail questionnaires. We also get emails at the offices every single day. But I think the coffee and donut sessions are probably my favorite, because there you get a lot more than just a 1 or a 2 sentence email.
Who do you have to answer to?
Every single registered voter in Schuylkill, Northern Berks, Southern Carbon, Lehigh, Northampton, and Monroe counties. And so it's, as I said, it's about 250,000 people.
How do you reach compromises on issues?
That's the hard part, and sometimes people think that compromise is a bad word. The Speaker of the House told me one time that anyone in Harrisburg, in elected government, who insists on bringing the entire loaf home ends up going hungry. And so sometimes the process is very incremental. I did a bill on trying to force state government to put their offices in the downtowns to try to revitalize communities rather than just put it out in the middle of nowhere. That took me 6 years. It was piece by piece by piece. It was slow, it was painful, but we finally got the governor's signature. And that took, Republicans, it took Democrats, it took conservatives, it took liberals, it took a lot of people working together. And that's really what the legislative process is all about.
Does your political party affect the things you do?
Sometimes. I think that, I'm a Republican representing a Republican district, and so that has to have an impact. But on some issues, for instance, on the scrap tire bill, a tire dump is a problem, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat. The same thing with fixing a pothole or fixing a major intersection where people are getting killed. On some of the other issues, on welfare reform, on some of those issues, partisan politics plays more of a role, but probably not as much as people sometimes think. Instead, the fact that I represent a pretty rural area, I think has much more of an impact on my voting district. People in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh tend to look at issues a little bit differently than people in Girardville and Ringtown, especially on something like gun control. On that day, if you would come to Harrisburg and watch the debate, you'd probably think we represent two different planets. And so that's an important factor you should consider.
And last, would you be open to discussing issues with youth?
I try to do it as much as I can. I have a 23-year-old and a 21-year-old who keep me pretty focused. I'm an old Boy Scout leader. I was my son's scoutmaster. I was his Cub Scout leader. And so I have enjoyed spending a lot of time with a lot of good kids over the years, and not just as part of the job.